What did the weird kid at your school do to earn that reputation? Story 1. He had a walking stick that he didn't need and claimed it had a sword in it. We all believed him for about a week until he started claiming only the worthy could pull it after we tried to get him to show us. Story 2. He baked a cake for the class. It was nobody's birthday or anything. The weird kid just baked a cake and brought it in. The teacher confiscated the cake and brought it to the teacher's lounge instead of throwing it away. Another teacher had a slice, and it had the kid's pubic hair baked into the cake. Never saw that kid again. Story 3. She used to have longish hair. One day, she decided to get a pixie cut, nothing too unusual so far. What made it strange, however, was that before cutting her hair, she had braided it into a thick, neat braid and brought it to school. That day, she tucked the braid under her beanie and went around to every teacher and acquaintance, asking them to pull her hair. Those who complied were met with a surprising twist. They'd end up holding the braid in their hand, while she burst out laughing, cracking up as loudly as possible. Story 4. The weird kid at my HS got into an argument with a pretty popular kid. Population guy wanted to fight. Weird kid told him that if he wins, then he gets to keep popular guy's thumbs they didn't fight. Story 5. He had just transferred to the school, and to introduce himself, he said, "What's going on? Everyone him, and I'm my stepsister," thinking that would gain him popularity points. His stepsister swapped schools again, not long after, because it was apparently true. Story 6. Always wore a different shoe on each foot, smelled terrible, and never brought a lunch. This was a Catholic school that cost a decent amount of money. Turns out he was just really, really poor. Everybody looked out for him afterward. Another girl was 12 and pregnant, and her mom was 24. Her baby daddy then killed a 711 clerk with a shotgun and made national news cause he said he wanted to know how it felt to kill someone. Story 7. She had neurodivergence issues. A bunch of other girls had a bulletin board outside the classroom where they always hung out and posted notes and crew drawings making fun of how other people, including her, dressed and acted, like Facebook bullying, but before social media was invented. The school turned a blind eye to this, until one day she took a lighter and set the board on fire. Then the school suddenly cared a lot, and she was expelled. Story 8. Dude ate a lunchbox of ground coffee every day for lunch. No drink, just the powder. And this was at 9 years old. I still sometimes wonder if he survived childhood. Story 9. Dale wore only black t-shirts and camo pants every day, had bug eyes, and was small even for a 5th grader. At our annual required school play, he chose in front of the entire school to play the kid who gets hypothermia. He stumbled all over the stage, stripping off his clothes because he was so hot and the teachers couldn't catch him. He fell off the stage into the kindergartners with his pants around his ankles when he finally dramatically died. Legend. Story 10. I was friends with a kid in grade school, Joe. Joe was losing his baby teeth. He had a crush on this one girl, Carla. He ran up to her in the playground to show her how loose his front teeth were. She called him gross, so he punched himself in the mouth and knocked out 2 of his baby teeth. He then chased Carla with his teeth clamped in his tiny fist, screaming, "How do you like me now?" He was my hero. He was sent home. The next day, he came back to school with the 2 teeth in a tiny box. He was later sent home for shooting the teeth through a straw at things during class. He would retrieve the teeth, rinse, repeat. What a menace. He is now a MD, happily married, but not to Carla. Story 11. We had a kid who would march up and down the halls, yelling military marching cadences. He would have his iPod in, and apparently, all that was on there were marching cadences. He also never talked to anyone. Every day, all day, before class. Marching, going from class to class. Marching after school to the bus. Marching, all while yelling those cadences. Not singing them. Yelling. We were all convinced he was going to shoot up the school. Story 12. He was into anime when that was very much seen as for losers. He always wore a Sailor Moon shirt during a middle school dance. The last song of the night was My Heart Will Go On, which I guess was his favorite song, and he started slow dancing with his arms around an imaginary partner. I hope he's had a good life. Story 13. Had a German foreign exchange student that dressed like Willy Wonka and carried around pies. For while I thought the only English he knew was "Do you like pie?" he was weird as but always smiling, and the pies were good. Story 14. Theater kid who wore a bowler hat all day, every day for a year, dressed and styled his hair like an emo kid, but would get really mad if you called him an emo kid because he hated that music. It was me, I was the weird kid. Story 15. We had a kid who used to hiss at people if they got too close to him. Head randomly meow during class 2. I think he was just really into cats, but it definitely made him stand out. Story 16. We had a foreign exchange student that was pretty awkward, and a kind girl bought him a blue Powerade when he forgot his wallet one day. A week later, he returns the bottle to her full of, "We didn't see him anymore." Story 17. Made plastic weapons with various school supplies, so he could shoot stuff at people. The weird part is he shot them at the other outcast kids. While he's probably a successful engineer at this point, I did get the pleasure to see one of the math nerds slap the out of him in retaliation once. Story 18, it was high school. He was a nerd, but not a fun one. He wrote a movie and was carrying the script around the school to show to teachers. He wrote his own autobiography, where he wrote in third person and called himself an artist. His mother was choosing who can come to his birthday, and it was high school, so parties meant beer, booze, and second base. Nobody came to his birthday. He is successful, awarded historical book writer. Story 19, this kid was National Honor Society. Never studied for anything, completed homework accurately within minutes of class starting, just never had to work for grades, super smart and gifted. He was high all the time. I don't just mean smoking. The kid did all kinds of substances, and it never messed with his natural ability to just learn things and hold on to the info and then put that into a project or test or something. Maybe not the typical thinking of the word weird, but still we're not common. Story 20, I attended a special education school that welcomed kids with various challenges from mild dyslexia to severe mental illness. Overall, it was a positive experience, small classes, attentive teachers, and just regular kids being kids despite our different needs. But there was one classmate I'll never forget. He appeared in our grades suddenly one day and immediately stood out with his unique behavior. Some of his memorable antics included sitting completely upside down in his chair during class, which the teacher oddly never addressed, creating an elaborate artwork using correction fluid Tipp-Ex on the principal's window. In full view of the entire school, during recess, he only stayed at our school briefly. Years later, I was surprised to spot him on television. He was getting a haircut and having a rather strange conversation with a barber. Looking back, I wonder what became of him. Story 21, ew. I got a doozy, so lots of the weird kids over the years, but I sat next to a kid in computer science in like 10th grade who was congenial enough. But his story's plot just thickened and thickened and thickened over the years. He was a stocky redhead kid with long hair that made me think of a lion's mane. He was usually pretty reserved, but easy to irritate, and on the one or two occasions he got made fun of enough to explode, he started screaming about his condition called blood vision, where he loses all control and tears apart everyone around him. When people would laugh at him, he'd storm out, saying it was for everyone's protection. I kind of felt bad for the guy. I was a semi-popular dude and tried to extend a helping hand by asking him questions about things he was into and about his condition. He said it was a congenital defect that plagued him all his life and that it was passed down from his mom, but that it helped him with his duties as a werewolf hunter. I dialed back on the questions and kept an arm's length, but I really was careful about not the dude off because this was post-Columbine and he had that 1,000-yard stare. Anyway, after that semester, I didn't see much of him when nod politely in a hallway. But I ended up in a class with his goth sister, and wouldn't you know it, she was a vampire hunter. I didn't get close with her, but I remember overhearing her go into great detail about her sacred duties and how she was the only one keeping everyone safe. Then, one day, I'm doing the office assistant extracurricular thing, and the office has glass walls all around, and commotion starts outside. People are gathering around, and I can't see who's in the middle, so I go to see if I can scope it out, but the AP told me to sit still and lock the door from the inside. I eventually see that the dude was getting wailed on by some other kid, and the sister was on the side yelling with her eyes closed, presumably casting spells. Security there, kids hauled off to their respective offices, calamity dies down, and then, their dad shows up for him in a wizard cloak and weird hat. He had a shortish gray beard and walked with a weird gaunt. I only saw him for a second from my AP's office, but I wasn't the only one, and we all talked about it for weeks. I don't remember if that's the last time I saw him or her, but shortly after they were both gone from the school. I always felt bad wondering how awful their childhoods and subsequent lives must have turned out being raised by that probable lunatic. Story 22, ours was a kid who liked to take his shirt off and shotgun, punching a hole in the can and chugging his sodas on our school bus like he was at a frat party. Years later, I took a job as a cook in a cafeteria. My manager said he hoped I stayed longer than the last guy who liked celebrating the weekend by slamming back sodas after poking a hole in them with a kitchen knife. Incredulously, I asked the guy's name. Yep, it was the Pepsi party animal himself. Some people never change. Story 23, she sat in a bush and growled at people that walked by. We called her Bush Girl or the Bush Monster she were growling. Arizona never change. Story 24, put his hands down the front of his pants, rifle around in there, pull out his hands, and wave them in your face asking the girls want to smell. Pretty sure he grew up to be a legit incel, still in mom's basement. Story 25, 14-year-old kid put alligator clips on the end of 2 wires, attached them to his shirt, then jammed both wires into an electrical outlet during science class. He'll never forget time slowing down during that moment. I saw two sparks slowly travel up the wire over the course of about 5 seconds. I remember the panic on his face as the sparks were approaching, the panic on the teacher's face when he saw it. The sparks hit the kid, and all the lights went out in the building momentarily. The lights flickered a few times, and the kid dropped to the floor. The kid managed to rip the clips off of himself and out of the sockets. He then stood up and looked at the teacher terrified, mainly because he thought he was going on in trouble. The kid went to hospital and was absolutely fine, but yeah, mad lad. Story 26, we had a weird kid that would do anything that he was dared to. Although I never saw it, the story was he was dared to eat a frog's eye in biology class. Full of formaldehyde, we all believed it at the time, not so sure anymore. Story 27, taxidermied his childhood cat that as far as we knew died of old age and natural causes, and then brought it to school to show the teacher he liked, a high school. Story 28, he would on his markers and get his all face blue. He used to aim his farts in anyone sit behind him in class. He stalked a friend of mine for over a year. He always made comments very disturbing during class. As that a girl in class had nice breasts, we were about 10 years old. A few years ago, I found out he became a doctor, a psychiatrist. Story 29, in 7th grade, a classmate, left her notebook open when she left to use the restroom during math class. Someone glanced over and saw that she had been doodling pictures of herself with a gun, shooting stick figures with the names of people she hated. She never did anything, but we were all a lot more wary of her after that. TBH, I think she did it on purpose. Story 30, made his own chainmail and wore it to school often. He wore it once, and anyone who was even remotely artistic or crafty or interested in fantasy gaming gave him attention that he normally never got. And so he just wore it all the time, but the positive attention stopped like day 3. Story 31, so I went to a very, very, very fancy elite prep school, like top 10 in the country, multiple presidents attended, etc., New England, yada yada. When I went there, they were going through a bit of a we are the cool school stage and had eliminated the dress code. No more coat. And Ty, you could basically wear anything, sweats even. This change had happened about 8 years earlier, so nobody currently enrolled had attended when there was a dress code. First day of 9th grade, a new kid shows up in a coat and tie. Nobody has any clue why. Did he not know? I mean, it's a day boarding school, so he must have seen the other kids. Anyway, he took a fair amount of in day 1. Day 2, wearing a coat and tie. Day 3, same thing. Then it escalated for anyone who has ever been to a fancy prep school with coat and tie. What it actually means is tanstone khakis, cornflower blue button-down, and blue blazer with penny loafers and a school tie. Then take the outfit and ball it up for a few weeks and put it on. I mean, everyone looks awful. Anyway, the escalation was 3-piece suits, then 3-piece suits with bowler hats and pocket watches. Then on a random Friday, he is wearing a tux. Armani, if I remember. Anyway, this went on for 4 years. I think he's a doctor now. Story 32, the nickname he was given was Jesse Cumjar because he, kept it under his bed apparently, and contributed to it with all the vim and vigor of the teenage boy he was. Story 33, ripping braces off in hallway before class started. Then he head-butted the biggest bully without hesitation when the dude tried making fun of him. Ended up becoming really popular. Story 34, kid was just a conceited little, but also weird. I used to think people used to just pick on him for being nerdy, but all that he got, he brought on himself. Like if someone gave the wrong answer to a question in class, head called him stupid out loud, and like that. He was very disrespectful, and when someone didn't put up with this, he would go running to the principal and claim he was being bullied, when in reality, it was just people not taking his. This was in high school too, by the way. Story 35, injected a spit into his arm. It's odd, but at the time he was just known for being a mad lad. As an adult, looking back, it's just sad that he was constantly doing things for attention and probably had a shitty home life. Story 36, a Pepsi boy. Kid came to high school and wore a Pepsi t-shirt every single day from 9th graduation. The weird thing was he wasn't poor, he just liked the Pepsi shirt. Story 37, he wore his long black hair in braids. And later dreads, he was white, played in the school band and a little outside of school too. Dude was always carrying around a 2-liter of Faygo in his back pocket that he drank all day late 90s. JNCOs were his thing. He was super dorky until halfway through 10th grade and just randomly changed, but people still didn't like him because it was a super homogeneous school, and he was like an alien there compared to all the other kids. He just sort of started doing really bizarre stuff after that, like eating slices of cheese he pulled out of his pants, not his pockets, his pants, and saying, this one tastes a bit nutty, or pulling these really old-timey practical jokes like hand buzzers, sneezing powder, etc., which to his credit actually worked most of the time, and just all sorts of things. He wasn't a bad guy really, and some of the weird stuff about him was related to him absolutely hating bigotry, Most of the popular kids in the school were racist, homophobic, and would fly Confederate flags on their lockers and stuff like that. This was in a blue state, very blue area, and he just had the habit of snatching the flags down and trashing them, or call other kids out on racist stuff, and be willing to back it up physically, which seemed pretty uncharacteristic of him otherwise. Then one day he just disappeared in senior year, and never came back to school. It turned out the guy was completely playing us all. He disappeared in 2001, before social media, and since he had no friends or relatives at that school, nobody knew what happened to him. A few years later, coincidentally, our friend groups converged due to a friend of mine dating a friend of his, and I ended up bullshitting with him at the bar. It turns out the guy was mostly normal, actually pretty cool, but he had wicked social anxiety outside of his close friends, which turned out to be from another school on the other side of town that he had met at work rather than at our school. Hanging out with them was what changed him to his goth sort of style, but that really wasn't a thing at our school, so the other kids still gave him for it. Eventually he realized that instead of trying to win them over, he could try to just repulse them, so they'd leave him alone, and it worked. Turns out most of the gross stuff he did was staged, like the cheese thing, which was actually in his pocket in a plastic bag with a hole he cut in his pocket to allow him to grab it, as if he had it in his drawers. The anti-bigotry thing turned out to be the real him, though. He just had no patience for that stuff. When he disappeared, he was actually having issues at home with his parents, especially his father, who was horribly abusive for most of his life. It turns out that he was already 18, and because of how poor his home and school life was, chose to secretly enlist in the military and told nobody until the day before he had to report to basic training. He then went to the school office that morning, pulled himself out of school, went home, packed his bag, said goodbye to his friends, and went home just in time for his recruiter to pick him up before his parents got home. Some years later, experimenting with drugs somehow managed to help him with his anxiety, and he wound up being a pretty kick-ass dude who I'm friends with now. Story 38, odd kid in general, quiet, didn't speak to hardly anybody, ever carried a huge duffel bag at all times. When he sat it down on the floor by his desk, he kept a foot on it always. Rumors about what he had in that bag circulated, but nothing ever came of it. Once somebody tried to get his bag, and he flipped out, screaming at the kid and smacking his desk. His voice went real deep, like growling instead of yelling. The kid was purple in the face when he finally calmed down. Seeing this, you knew it was a different level of anger. Definitely not kids been teased and had enough anger. Something was wrong. Anyway, we graduated. Forgot all about him until one day I read the paper. He had murdered his father and stepmother. During the attack, his dad got a gun and managed to shoot the kid, killed him, and then the dad died from his injuries. 3 total deaths. Kid spent time in mental hospitals off and on. Made me think back to that flip out and remember how I knew something was off. Even then, Story 39, like many dorks, I signed up for French to sit by cute girls. I ended up sitting behind a girl who, in retrospect, had some challenges on many occasions. I watch her slowly pick her nose, carefully examine her find, then eat it. My French isn't great. Story 48, pitch perfect imitation of the intro to the hamster dance song. It was done far too often, but it was pretty impressive now that I think of it. Edit hamster, I am le dumb. Story 41 told someone in 7th grade he sticks pencils in his, to which the other kid promptly stood up in front of the whole class and screamed it to the world. Kid was known as 2 for the rest of his school career. Poor feller. Story 42 had ringworm for a really long time. Lived with older grandparents who didn't really understand how to treat it. We were friendly before that, but the teachers had us all sit further from him and avoid touching him. BC. They didn't want it to spread like crazy, and that just turned him into an outcast, and we started to grow apart. I think one of the teachers finally had to make a house visit, and eventually the ringworm cleared up, but by then the damage was done, and worse rumors spread. I still think about him often. Last I heard, he wrote a children's book about uplifting kids who are different. I hope he's doing well. Story 43, my elementary school offered Bosco sticks for lunch sometimes. If you don't know what those are, it's a cheap and highly processed breadstick filled with mozzarella cheese. This cheese was very stringy. You could probably get a few for you stretch if you really tried. One day, the weird kid pulled out the mozzarella, swallowed it nearly whole. He hung on to the end and pulled it back out. I couldn't finish my lunch. I was so grossed out. Story 44, I had a kid at my high school that came to school every single day dressed as Link from Legend of Zelda, sword and everything. Everyone knew him. However, for some reason, he got along great with everyone. In the hallways, I always saw people giving him high fives, saying hello, all sorts of stuff. Against all odds, he seemed insanely popular with every person in the school. Story 45 took pictures of any girls who wore Converse. Not full-body pics, but only their feet. One day, someone saw his picture album on his phone, and it was just filled with random girls' shoe feet pics. I wore Converse one day and was in the library, and he was next to me, and caught him jerking off while looking at my feet. I refuse to wear them to this day. Thanks a lot, Chris. Story 46, he had his hair braided like Fieldy from Korn, started wearing a leather jacket that kind of looked like the Fonz jacket from Happy Days, then started wearing a Fonz shirt under said leather jacket, and just acting like the Fonz. Thumbs up and outbursts and too cool for school attitude bit with no one playing along. Eventually, he just started wearing a sock on his arm and calling it Mr. Socko, or something during a time that WWE's Mankind was doing this regularly. But he hated wrestling and got irradiated if anyone made that comment or connection. Was one of the richest kids in school, but you would only know if you drove him home or caught his random arrogance towards the poorest dude randomly invited me to see Metallica when I was 13. He got 2 tickets for his birthday and picked me out of the rocker stoner kids. He would try and declare himself the leader of sometimes just really try-hard attention type, but with that rich kid better than everyone's smug aura and undeserved false superiority complex. I bet growing up humbled dude a lot. I tried to look him up a few years ago, but no luck. Story 47, Ronnie had always been a weird kid. He was adopted after supposedly a pretty rough childhood, and in hindsight was just acting out. He was basically the token bully bad kid all through my elementary school years. Then came 6th grade. Mrs. Shegig kept several doves in cages as class pets. One morning we're all lined up to leave homeroom and go to our classes, and Ronnie is unfortunately right next to one of the dove cages. Dude opens the cage, grabs and completely skewers this poor with a pencil. Feathers and blood everywhere as the flops, or attempts to flop as well as you can with your wings, are pinned to your body with the pencil that is stuck through you. Mrs. Shegig is in tears, and the rest of us are half in shock and half giggling at the absurdity. In hindsight, I'm surprised he never went Columbine on us. But today, he's actually fairly well adjusted and living a blue-collar life. Story 48, a dog at a birthday party. A party the birthday boy's mother made him invite this kid to. A party the mom would regret that decision greatly. A party that ended before pizza arrived, before cake, and before we got to use the bomb slip and slide that my friend's dad made for the party out of big tarps and sprinklers. That was 30 years ago, and I cannot unhear that mom scream. One girl started her period in class and told everyone her horse gave birth, and she didn't have time to change clothes before coming to school. She was our resident horse girl, and she didn't have a horse. Story 49, he inserted his member into a hole on a tree and proceeded to do the deed with the tree. This happened during lunch, so a lot of folks had to be witnesses to that. We were in high school by then, but he already had previous instances of taking care of himself in front of others during middle school. Story 50, in middle school, he got caught stroking it to the whipping scene in the movie Roots. Dude sat like 3 desks behind me, and it was the first time I had heard a teacher yell, "What the?" Story 51 told a tall tale that he wound up getting roped in as a security guard at a casino, a 14-year-old nerd, and got shot, but survived because he was wearing 3 layers of body armor. He died in a car crash the next year. Story 52, this thread is reminding me of Kevin, so I figured I had to share this classic comment. It's not uncommon as a teacher to have students who are a bit behind the curve in certain aspects, but 99.99999 of the time they're keen on something. They might not understand how to identify a noun or what theme is, but they somehow know how to make a mean plate of nachos. You learn pretty quick to not judge fish for their tree climbing ability. You know, I thought this was a rule when I was teaching until I met Kevin. Kevin isn't his real name, but it doesn't matter because he can't spell it anyway. Kevin was a student of mine during my last year of teaching. He came to my classroom with very little to show for his academic past. He had moved a few times, and thus was missing a lot of typical test scores that we use to try and ballpark their ability. Don't worry. It was a ballpark. We didn't make major decisions until we actually had a chance to talk and work with a student for a bit. I thought that's fine. He'll just do some one-on-one with Kevin, and see what's up. One-on-one with Kevin was like conversing with someone who had forgotten everything in a freak, if not impossible, amnesia incident. There was no evidence that he had learned anything past the 2nd grade. And now he was in 9th grade, flabbergasted. I figured we needed to get more serious with this. If he was going to be in my class, I needed to know why and how. I decided to meet with him, his guidance counselor, his parents, and another teacher to see what was really going on. This is where it all became clear. It was by some incredible fluke that his family hadn't been wiped off the face of the earth years ago. Odds are his entire heritage was based on blind luck and some type of sick divine intervention that saves his family every time a threat presents itself. Kevin was the genetic pinnacle of this null achievement. Even my instructional lead, a woman who could find a redeeming trait in a Balrog, failed to see any reason this kid or his family should be alive today. So here is a list of events that made it abundantly clear that God exists, and he's laughing uncontrollably. Kevin frequently forgot when where class was. On more than one occasion, I had to retrieve him from other classrooms. Kevin ate an entire 24-pack of crayons, puked, and then did it again the next day. This is ninth grade. I have no idea where he got crayons. Kevin's dad wrote tuition checks and mailed them to me, his English teacher. This was a public school. When I gave it back to Kevin, voided, to give to his dad with a brief note explaining that this is a public school. Kevin got in trouble for trying to spend it at 711 after school. Kevin was removed from the culinary arts program after leaving a cutting board on the gas stove and starting a fire. Twice Kevin threw his lunch at the school resource officer and tried to run away. He ran into a door and insisted it wasn't him. Kevin stole my phone during class. I called it, it rang. He denied that it was ringing, not that it wasn't his, not that he did it. No, he denied that the phone was actually ringing. He tried it 3 times before the end of the year. Kevin called the basketball coach a motherfucking bitch during gym. Basketball tryouts were that afternoon. Kevin tried out. It didn't go well. Kevin's mom could never remember which school he went to. She missed several meetings because she drove to other schools, none of which he ever went to. Kevin tazzed himself in the neck before a football game. Kevin kept a bottle of orange Kool-Aid in his backpack for about 4 months. He thought it would turn to alcohol. He drank it during homeroom and threw up. Kevin said the N-word a lot. Kevin was white. The high school was 84 black. Kevin got beat up a lot. Kevin stole another student's iPhone and tried to sell it back to them. Kevin didn't understand that his grade was dependent on tests, quizzes, homework, classwork, and participation. Kevin finished his first semester with a 3 average. He tried to bribe me with 11. Kevin spit on a girl and said, "You should get out of those wet clothes." The girl was the Spanish student teacher. Kevin didn't know dogs and cats were different animals. Kevin tried to download onto a computer in the library at the circulation desk. While he was logged on, Kevin asked a girl to prom. He was in 9th grade, and freshmen don't go to prom by asking for a phone number and then texting her his address. Kevin got gum in his hair constantly. Kevin regularly tried to cheat on assignments by knocking the pile over, grabbing one before I had picked them all up, and then writing a name on it wherever there was room. Kevin had several allergies, but neither his parents nor he could remember what they were. They were very concerned that the holiday party, it's high school, we don't have those, would have peanuts. When they finally got a doctor's note, he was allergic to amoxicillin. Kevin and his parents took a trip to Nassau. How they did, they even get airline tickets, and forgot all their luggage at home. I didn't believe him when he told me until I talked to his mom, who told me first thing when I saw her at the bi-weekly meeting. Kevin's grandfather apparently died in a chainsaw accident. I can only assume God was looking the other way that day. Story 53, ick about the weirdest. But there was a girl in my school who wore cat ears every single day. Then she started this guy, and after a month or so, they both wore the cat ears. During every school event she had him. I think even in graduation, I just never understood why. Story 54, everyone had to take their shoes off to get their heights and weights measured in gym class. And someone accidentally put this guy's shoes on, and the kid threw a violent temper tantrum about it, chasing the kid who took the shoes around the gym, crying, punching a hole through a window, slamming and kicking the bleachers, and finally, most memorably, screaming, "I will you" to the kid in a full rage. The whole school made sure he never forgot that moment for the rest of our days at that school. Ate an onion like an apple. Story 55, nothing. Mike D. just lied and said he saw Richie spanking in the boys' room, and Richie became spanked for all of 7th and 8th grade. Even after Mike D. admitted he made it up. Story 56, know a guy that climbed up in the ceiling of middle school and videotaped the girls' locker room and got caught. Everyone knew of it, and it followed him through his school days. Story 57, he was the first person I ever met with ADHD. This was back in the 70s when ADHD wasn't understood very well, so he was just known as the hyper kid. I went to his house once to play, and he told me he had to take medicine to help him calm down, but it didn't seem to help very much. Then his family moved away, and he didn't come back to school the next year. Story 58, I was a tomboy in a Catholic school pre-K through 8th grade, so wanted to play sports, wanted to wear pants, girls had to wear skirts, and I hated them. Liking boy things like Teat Minty, not liking girl things like makeup and jewelry, wearing my dad's folding aviator glasses that were giant on my tiny face, not watching the generally popular shows at the time, but liking cartoons and eventually anime, getting 2 lead roles in my school plays that were both male roles, being content to be alone, and getting into fistfights with boys who bullied me. My mom and dad raised me to be self-confident and stick to my guns, so I was never trying to be weird. I was just enjoying what I liked and didn't pay attention to if it was what I was supposed to be into. Funny enough, that made my life through middle and grade school is what earned me my real friends in high school, college, and my general adult life. Just had to survive the first 13 years of misery. Story 59, he lied a lot, told people he drank blood, killed his hamster in a microwave, was in a blood play with his girlfriend. You wouldn't know her. She went to another school. Then he killed his mom, stabbing her over 90 times. He did get twat over the head with a huge rock a couple of months prior. Always wonder if that caused neurological damage to him. Story 60 made a VHS tape of himself shoving a plastic toy fish up his, then gave the video to another kid whose mom gave it to the principal. The whole school found out and called him Fish. He transferred to a different school shortly after. During junior high, I was the weird kid. I could snort the cafeteria spaghetti up my nose and spit it out my mouth. Yeah, a real Renaissance man.